My name's Travis Miner, and on behalf of Open Door Education, I'd like to help you understand what's changing on the SAT and what does this mean for you. Let's talk about the first big change. The SAT is going to move to a digital format. Students will no longer take the test with pencil and paper unless they receive specific accommodations to do so. Now, for me, I don't like that change. I like a tactile test. I like being able to write on it pencil and paper the old-fashioned way. But that's not what students want, and it's not the way that students engage with content these days. So much of their work is already done on computers. It actually makes sense that the test would make that change. It better matches how they're doing the rest of their work, and I don't think people are going to miss the old school pencil and paper administration of the test. The second change, and this is made possible by the test's shift to a digital format, is that the SAT will now be adaptive by section, meaning students will take a first section of math, for example, and based on the results of those first sections, their second section will be adjusted in difficulty. So if a student does really well in their first section, the SAT says, this student's on track for a pretty high score. Let's give them slightly more difficult questions so we can better identify where exactly do they fall at that high end of the score range. Students who have a more difficult experience with the first section of the test, the SAT is going to be giving them easier questions, again, so it can better identify within a limited range where would that student's score actually shake out. Now, for a lot of students, this sounds like a pretty complicated process. It sounds like it might shift the strategy, but in all likelihood, at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing. Do your best to get as many of the questions right as possible, and don't spend too much time on questions that are frustrating or confusing. We'll see how the format of the individual question items evolves, and we'll be prepared to respond to that. But for the most part, this isn't as big a shift as I think some people are anticipating, because at the end of the day, the content that students will need to know is still remaining the same, which means no matter what format they're taking the test in, it's going to be linear expressions in math, as well as quadratics and working with exponents. In grammar questions, students are going to need to know commas, apostrophes, semicolons, subject-verb agreement. The underlying content stays the same, which is why if you're a parent worried about this change, thinking, how do I prepare for this ahead of time? The best answer is simply wait. This change isn't happening until March of 2024. So if your student's a first year in high school or younger, then this will affect them. If not, this doesn't even affect your student. But assuming that you do have a student who will be affected by this change, it's going to be several months, if not a year, before we really can begin to anticipate what this new test will actually look like, and good material will start rolling out for it. So for the time being, students should focus on doing what has always been most important, which is learning their content in school, working hard to have the best and most successful academic experience possible, and waiting to think about tests until it's time to think about tests, which is typically the winter and spring of their junior year of high school. Now, the changes to the SAT also suggest that we will probably see some changes from the ACT. We don't know what those are yet, although in the past they've hinted at digital testing. They've also hinted at single section retesting, which means a student could go back and take just a section of a test that maybe hadn't gone as well in a past administration of the test. Will this happen? It remains to be seen, but the appeal of a shorter digital SAT is pretty significant. And once we get past the initial uncertainty of making that transition, look for the ACT to try to find ways to catch up or compete with the SAT by offering a test that's also hopefully shorter and more user-friendly for students that are used to working in a digital environment. For additional information about standardized tests, academic success, organizational coaching, and all things education, please stick with us at Open Door Education. Thanks so much and have a great day.